Howdy folks, Donnie here again. And in this video, we'd like to take a look at that age-old question that Linux beginners always ask, which Linux distro is best for beginners? It's common for beginners to be confused about this because there are so many Linux distros available. It's not like Windows or Mac, where your choices are either take it or leave it. There's nothing wrong with being a bit confused about this because I was too when I first started out. But here's the problem. Whenever a Linux newbie goes to a Linux forum to ask this question, it always ends up looking something like this. One person will come in and just trying to be helpful will say, well, I think you should use this distro, and these are the reasons why. Somebody else will come along and say, no, you're an idiot if you use that distro. You should use my distro instead. And then somebody else will come along and say, no, both of y'all are stupid for using those distros. Use my distro instead. And it'll just keep going on and on and on like that. And let me tell you, you have not seen immaturity until you've gone into some Linux forum and asked the question, what Linux distro should I use as a beginner? So the poor newbie just ends up being more confused than ever and just goes away from the forum thinking that Linux users are a bunch of jerks, right? Yeah, I know. I'm trying to be family friendly here, So what's a poor Linux newbie to do? Well, let's look at some general guidelines. First, are you looking for a desktop workstation distro? Are you looking to get into server administration? Or are you looking to do cloud deployments? Because your answer to these questions is going to have a bearing on your choice. So let's say that you're looking for a desktop workstation type distro. One thing you can do is go to Distrowatch.com and read about the different Linux distros there. Over on the right, on that page hit ranking column, you'll see that we have the top 100 Linux distros listed there. And you can go in and these links will take you to the page for these different distros. And for example, here's the home page for Linux Mint, which has been the #1 most popular Linux distro for desktop users for a while now. But you don't necessarily have to limit yourself to the top distros. Now, Lubuntu, which I'm using to create this video, currently sits at number 19. But yeah, guess what? I like it, okay? I don't care if it's down to number 19. It's what I like. And there are various YouTube channels where people will demo the various Linux distros, such as, Begin Linux Guru. Oh my goodness, how did that get in there? But anyway, but no, seriously, my channel, I'm just starting out. I'm just starting to build up, and I will eventually get more demos of the different Linux distros in there. But in the meantime, there are plenty of other Linux channels as well where people go in and they demo the different Linux distros and show you all about the different features, and both good and bad, about this Linux distros. Things to look for in a desktop workstation distro. Well, first off, ease of setup and use. So Slackware, Gen2, and Arch would definitely not fall into that category. In fact, Gen2, that is the Linux distro for masochists, I'm telling you. Now, once you get them set up, yeah, they might not be so bad. But although they do have their little idiosyncrasies to maintain, so you still, as a beginner, you probably want to avoid those three distros. You also want a distro with a good selection of software in its repository, because the different distros all have their own repository systems, and it's not like Windows or Mac, where you got to pay big money, to get the different programs that you need. With Linux, each distro has its own repository, and everything in there is free of charge. It's free for the taking. You got Office Suite, graphics software, video software, the whole works. The only catch is some Linux distros have better repositories than others. And for example, Fedora and SetOS might not fit your needs if you need a distro with a really good selection of software. All right, you can increase the selection of software somewhat by adding third-party repositories, but right out of the box, you have hardly anything at all in the Fedora and CentOS. For Debian, Mint, OpenSUSE, any member of the Ubuntu family, you would probably be a good fit, and those aren't the only ones, but the Debian, Mint, OpenSUSE, would definitely be a good fit for anyone who needs good software and also an easy setup and installation process. And you also might want to look for something with up-to-date packages. Debian is probably not going to fit your needs if you've got to have something with up-to-date packages. If you don't care that your Office suite or whatever software is in there is a few versions behind, then yeah, Debian is an excellent operating system. But it's just the only real disadvantage of it is that it's always behind the times with its packages. Any member of the Ubuntu family might be better. Ubuntu, comes out with a new version of Ubuntu every 6 months, so they do a better job of keeping the packages up to date. Also, there's PC Linux OS, which is a rolling release distro. In other words, instead of coming up with new versions on a periodic basis, it'll just keep updating itself just as time goes on, so you always have the up-to-date packages. There's also the matter of which desktop interface to choose. Some folk like full-featured desktops like GNOME 3 or KDE. They are the heaviest resource usage desktops, weighing in at about 512 megabytes or so of memory usage at idle. Still a lot less than Windows, which weighs in about 1.5 gigabytes of memory usage at idle. How anybody would design an operating system that uses that much memory, I don't know, but somehow they did, right? But your GNOME 3, KDE, they're full-featured, have lots and lots of bells and whistles. You can do all kinds of customization to both of them. But some folk like me just like to keep things simple with a nice lightweight desktop. I don't care about the bells and whistles. I don't care about the different customizations you can do. I just want a plain, straightforward desktop that gives me a nice old-fashioned start menu and just lets me get to my stuff in an easy manner. So for me, I like the LXDE desktop. It does everything I need it to do, weighs in about 100 megabytes of memory usage at idle, which is way less than GNOME or KDE, of course. And you're not limited to just putting that on old, out-of-date equipment. You can put that on a new machine as well. I mean, I'm running Lubuntu 16.04, which of course comes with a lightweight LXDE desktop on a machine that's running an AMD FX 6100 processor, clocked at 3.3 gigahertz, 16 gig of memory. And yeah, it flies on this machine. Some distros will lock you into a specific desktop. Some distros will let you choose when you perform the installation. So for example, if you get Lubuntu, that is a specific desktop. It's the LXDE desktop. And each member of the Ubuntu family uses a desktop, and once you get that installed, you're locked into that desktop. And then other distros, for example, OpenSUSE and Debian, will let you choose a desktop when you perform the operating system installation. And then Debian is actually unique in that it allows you to install multiple desktops when you perform the installation. So you can choose, I think there are like 4 or 5 different desktops that are offered that you can install all at the same time when you install the operating system. And then when you get to the graphical login screen, you can choose whichever desktop you want to use. So you're not locked into any of them when you're using Debian. But that's the guidelines for choosing a desktop or workstation distro. If you want to get into Linux server administration, the choice is a lot more clear-cut and there are a lot fewer choices. Red Hat Enterprise Linux is the 800-pound gorilla in the world of enterprise-grade server operating systems. If you go into a shop that's running Linux servers, there is an excellent chance that it's going to be running some form of Red Hat Enterprise. Red Hat is good stability, thoroughly tested, mature source code. It has the best out-of-box security. Red Hat and anything derived from Red Hat is like the only Linux distro family that has the home directories of your users locked down by default when you install the operating system and when you create new user accounts. With Red Hat and its derivatives, the only people who can get into a person's home directory is the person who owns that home directory. Everybody else is locked out. But with Debian, Ubuntu, actually pretty much all of the other Linux distros, the home directories by default are just left wide open. So it's left to either the owner of those home directories or the administrator to make sure that those home directories get locked down. Also with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, we have something called SE Linux. That's not a separate distro of Linux, as the name sounds. It stands for Security Enhanced Linux. It's just code that's in the Linux kernel, and there's also a suite of tools that goes with it, which will help prevent attackers and intruders from exploiting your operating system. And also Red Hat and its derivatives also have a pre-configured firewall. Most other Linux distros, you have to jump through the hoops of configuring the firewall yourself once you get the operating system installed. Now, the one slight little problem with Red Hat Enterprise is that it is a fee-based distro. But since Red Hat Enterprise Linux is Linux, it has to abide by the terms of the GNU GPL license, which requires them to make the source code for the Red Hat Enterprise available to anybody who wants to download it and to anybody who wants to modify it or create some other distro. So we have CentOS out there, which is one of several different of these Linux distros that are derived from Red Hat Enterprise source code. CentOS is the most popular. And essentially, if you learn CentOS, you are learning Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So CentOS gives you a good way to learn Red Hat Enterprise without having to pay the fee to Red Hat in order to get the official Red Hat. So given how widespread Red Hat is in your enterprise, you can't go wrong by learning either CentOS or Red Hat Enterprise if you want to get into learning how to be an enterprise Linux administrator. Now, running a rather distant second in the enterprise market is SUSE Enterprise. It comes in both desktop and server versions. It's a fee-based product, but you can use OpenSUSE to help you learn. And then we have Ubuntu. It's very popular as a desktop choice, but Ubuntu server never really caught on in the enterprise market as well as its creators had hoped it would. But Ubuntu server, however, is the most popular choice for cloud deployments. So if you have clients wanting to deploy virtual machines on Rackspace or Amazon Web Services or even on Microsoft Azure, 9 chances out of 10, they're probably going to want you to deploy an Ubuntu server virtual machine. So there you have it. There's just some general guidelines on which Linux distro to start with. And I kind of tried to stay away, for the most part, on specific information on specific distros other than some of the enterprise server distros. But you'll find plenty of videos on other YouTube channels. And of course, I will be adding more distro reviews on this channel later on. So you can stay tuned to that. And if you like my videos, be sure to share and subscribe. And I thank you for watching.